SciByte is produced by JupiterBroadcasting.com, independent entertainment that's on demand and always thoughtful. Check us out. Hi everyone, you're listening to SciByte. It was streamed live on November 22nd, 2011, and released for download on November 23rd. That's a Wednesday morning. My name is Chris, and joining me like every single week is Heather.
Hello there, Chris.
Hey Heather, what do we have coming up on SciByte today?
We're going to take a look at the Curiosity Rover launching this week, currently on Saturday.
Awesome.
Europa's water, that's Jupiter's moon. Bugs, Voyager spacecraft, telescopes, take a peek back into history and look up what's in the sky.
Always one of my favorite parts. And then also, don't forget, we're going to cover a little bit of holiday shopping advice. There you go. That's what I'm trying to say. So you have a segment coming up on buying the right telescope for the holidays, which I'm going to be kind of curious about. Because I've always kicked around the idea of getting myself a telescope. It's actually for Christmas too. So kind of interested in that.
Yeah.
But before we get into the news, do you want to cover a little bit of SciByte feedback?
Yes, on Google Plus, somebody marked, a Pluto joke. It was, "Dear NASA, your mom thought I was big enough. Love Pluto." And over the years, I've gotten asked about Pluto a lot. A couple years back, I wrote my mom a big email about it. She shared it amongst her little teacher friends.
Oh, that's nice.
But it really boils down to a couple of different things. One, people are really passionate about Pluto.
People are attached to Pluto, and I felt that a little bit myself sometimes.
One of the guys, they kind of put a lot of blame on him. He's a curator at a New York Science Museum, and he did a big new astronomy unit, and he tucked Pluto not up with the other planets, but down in the basement. This is before the ruling. And so a lot of people blamed him for Pluto being knocked out. He's gotten death threats over this. So, people are really passionate. Granted, on the other hand, Pluto was never very planet-like. It's tilted more than 10 degrees off of all the other planets. Its orbit, instead of being circular like all the other ones, actually takes it inside the orbit of Neptune for about 20 years every orbit. So it was never really so much planet-like. But they just called it a dwarf planet. It's not like it's no longer a planet. It's like saying a Siamese cat isn't a cat.
Right. Okay.
So it is still a planet. It is still the same rock that it was before it was even discovered. And it brought up a lot of talk.
Yeah,
I
would say so.
In the classroom, it's talk out of the classroom. And I always encourage people to look at what science is saying. What are the scientists saying? Analyze it, look at it, debate it. Why not?
Yeah.
I said in the post, if neutrinos possibly could travel faster than the speed of light, what else is science going to show us? It's changing every day.
Right. I thought the perfect solution for this would be have your parameters that define a planet, have your established rules and laws of what a planet is, and then just add an addendum that says except for Pluto. And then Pluto
There was talk of that too.
Yeah, there you go. Then you solve the problem.
There was talk of excluding Pluto from all the rules.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, there was.
Okay, well, good.
Because scientists realized that there was going to be a lot of passion over it.
Yeah. So they knew it was coming, huh?
Yeah, they kind of knew it was coming. I don't think anybody realized the fervor that it really got. These people meet every year. They make a lot of rulings every year. Nobody cares.
Right.
If they had knocked Mercury out, would people have cared? If they had added 2 or 3 more planets, would people have cared?
No, I don't think if you added, but I think when you take a planet away, you grow up just knowing some things about the universe.
You grow up knowing certain things, but science is changing. But I also think it has to do with the name. I really do think that if they'd knocked Mercury out, people would have had less of a fuss than Pluto.
You really think so? You think why? Because of the cartoon character?
Yeah. When people are kids, they think, and Pluto!
Oh, maybe. All right. You might be onto something.
There is a little part in your heart that when you're a kid and you learn about Pluto, you're like, Pluto! And you think of Mickey's dog and the planet sitting there together and they're happy.
Yeah, okay.
Now, I think there would have been a fuss if they knocked out Mercury. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I just wonder if it would have been a bit as big.
There is a little underdog element to Pluto too, right? Because it's so small and it's so far out there. So there is a little bit of it's the guy on the ropes and you want to pull for him.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit of that too. I mean, obviously, I'm still tapped into it because I'm the one that reshared that on Google Plus and made my commentary on it. So it's still something, even to this day, that people are still kicking around.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you see the jokes every once in a while, the T-shirt printouts and everything. So, but I still think it's a good thing in the long run.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it gets people talking.
Yeah. And where are you on Google Plus? You're Mars based on Google Plus, right?
I'm JB Mars based.
There you go. So if people want to find you, that's where they do it. And with that said, let's move on to the news. All right, what do we got this week?
We're going to start off the week with the Mars Science Laboratory Curiosity Rover. It's launching on Saturday. This is a big old rover.
I am really excited about this. Thing is like about the size of like a full-size Humvee, right? I mean, it's
this
really
is a Mini Cooper.
No, I look bigger than a Mini Cooper, I think.
Well, it's
I guess I only got one
long.
picture at it.
It's about 9 feet long.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So I mean, it's really big. I mean, it's my goodness. Let's see. It's about 5 times as large as the Spirit and Opportunity rovers.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it's almost 2,000 pounds heavy too.
Yeah.
So this guy's taking this. It's getting ready to launch, but let's keep in mind it still has to get to Mars. It won't even be getting to Mars until like what, August of 2012.
That's right. That is the target date right now.
Okay. Now, I know this thing has a ton of science equipment on it, but something else it's doing that's different than the Mars rovers that are already on there is they were like, they're completely solar powered. We talked about this a little bit before, but this one actually has like a little plutonium in there or something, right?
Yeah, as a radioisotope thermoelectric generator. They've been used before. They were used on the Mars landers Viking 1 and Viking 2 back in the 70s. But yeah, it's got plutonium-238.
Actually, I think I read it was also used on the moon lander. In the Apollo missions.
Yeah, it's been used successfully on previous missions.
That said, I was surprised. There's actually a bit of blowback from the public, and they want to disclaim, when it's launching, what areas could be affected if there's I guess maybe a catastrophe during the launch. Maybe people are concerned about like a mid-air explosion or something. Anything
with nuclear power or any isotope, anything of this nature always is worrisome. Now, they actually moved the launch date back a day because there were some batteries on the flight termination system battery.
Oh,
so if they, something happened and they'd have to terminate in mid-flight or mid-takeoff, to successfusly do something with it and put it into a safe place. That battery was getting some funny readings, or it was low, so they pushed the launch back a day so that they could go in, replace that, test it. So they have.
Oh, okay.
They have they have systems in place to kind of watch for that.
Self-checking and monitoring and alerting when something fails and things like that. But the thing that's really kind of, I don't want to skip past some of the stats here, but I know as a Mars aficionado, you've got to be excited about some certain aspects of this thing, right?
Oh yeah, it's crazy awesome. Well, starting off, leading from the power that provides a lot more power than just the solar panels. It also means that it can continue running in the winter. The Mars rovers have to kind of find a safe place and kind of hunker down for the winter because the sun is too low. They can just kind of keep enough power going to keep it from freezing up. This guy can just keep on chucking. It provides a lot of power for some of these instruments, which are really cool.
Yeah, yeah. Now, but before you go to those instruments, though, I want to mention, because you made a note here, and as a computer geek, I love this. Yeah. It has 256 megabytes of RAM and 2 gigs of flash storage memory, which is kind of quaint and adorable that, going to Mars, you only get 256 megabytes of RAM. I love that kind of stuff.
That's why I put it in there for people.
I think iPads have more than that now. I'm not sure, but I think so.
Yeah. Well, it has to
definitely on the storage.
And it's also hardened against radiation for space travel and all this other stuff.
Yeah, I know. I just think it's kind of fun. Yeah. All right, so tell me about some of the instruments that are on this thing.
I mean, it's got the cameras like most of these rovers do. It's got cameras and lenses. It's got a 7-foot arm. The little robotic arm on it is 7 feet long. So it's got a really high-powered magnifying glass on that can reach down to features smaller than the width of human hair. It can reach out 7 feet and see things smaller than that. It's got...
That is pretty significant, really.
Oh, yeah. It can go out and it can drill into things and bring it back. And there's a couple of major chemistry and mineralogy instruments on the main body itself. So it can bring it back, and it can do things like take X-ray analysis. So it'll shine things on it and be able to tell the crystalline structure.
Oh, like based on the reflections and whatnot.
Based on reflections and refractions and things like that. Now, one of the things that a lot of people hop onto that is pretty cool is its laser.
Yeah, now, a nuclear-powered laser robot that travels other worlds. But what do they use this laser for?
Well, it can fire up to 30 feet away. And what it does is it fires a laser and it vaporizes a little chunk of rock.
Oh, so this is a serious laser. This isn't like a pointing at a presentation laser.
No, this is not the kind of laser you can buy off the shelf anywhere legally.
Yeah.
And so they'll vaporize a little piece of rock, and they'll be able to point a spectrograph at it and see kind of some instant analysis. These rovers take a while to get places. I mean, they're driving from Earth. You know, there is a delay. You have to map out very carefully how you drive, where you drive. So what this is going to allow them to do is say, that rock looks kind of interesting. Zap. Nope, not so interesting. Go to this other rock.
Oh, so how fantastic is that?
It'll allow them to analyze things from far away, get some science, but also say, no, that rock is maybe not as awesome as we thought. Let's not waste the 3 weeks it takes to get there and get to another rock. We'll instead go to the rock that looks the most interesting. It shows the most potential science.
That's great. That is really great. Talk about just a great savings of time and energy and power on this thing. I mean,
yeah.
And wear and tear. I mean, just overall, that's huge.
Oh, yeah. Being able to really analyze something before you have to drive over to it. You know, you have, like you said, the add, the wear, add, the tear, add the time. So on top of the science, being able to focus on getting the most bang for your buck during the time that it goes.
Now, they would have to, I would imagine, because of the delay, maybe batch command, like say, try these 3 things and then send us back the results, and then in the next window of communication, then we'll order you to go somewhere, right? But it must work. They have to work sort of like methodically like that, I would think.
Yeah, it's kind of a dual system. I believe most of these rovers have some sort of internal smarts to them. I believe this one has more than the others, that, you know, it says it can kind of intelligently guess to go over to this rock. You know, this wheel has to go up and compensate these wheels with this speed, you know, and the tire treads themselves have these little specifically spaced gaps in them so that they have a camera looking back at its tread behind it, and it can measure the distance between the tread marks and say, actually, I've turned the wheels 20 times and I'm not moving. Stop.
Yeah.
So it doesn't dig itself into a hole like one of the rovers.
You can actually look at its footsteps, or I guess its tracks.
And say, hey, things are slowing down. I should stop until the scientists back on Earth tell me what to do.
That's pretty cool.
So, yeah, and they send batch commands. I mean, somebody will go through with lines of code and run it through simulation after simulation after simulation, then send all the data packets to the rover, and it will run them, do whatever science they said to do, or stop and take the pictures. The scientists will get that information, then create a new set of batch data that says, all right, reach your arm out to here. And then they'll wait to say the rover, and they'll be like, yep, it is still 3 inches away like we thought. Now move it a little bit closer and do this.
Wow.
So there's a lot of do this, stop, look, then do.
Check everything,
then go a little bit farther and do the science.
Now, this is so one of the things people might not know is SciByte's an audio show, and we've really kind of set the show up for commuters and things like that. But we do have a companion video that kind of goes along and showcases some of the links and visuals that Heather includes in the show notes. You have a ton for this one, but what it's showing right now is some of the stuff you've been talking about, and it strikes me as I watch this, and I'm sorry to derail, but just think about this concept for a second. If something were ever to happen to Earth and humanity no longer was surviving on this planet and we were wiped out, one of the only remaining traces of us that another civilization would have would be our abandoned rovers on Mars.
Yeah, our landers and our rovers on the moon or Mars.
That would be what survives us. That's pretty crazy. And these things are pretty sophisticated. But if now looking at the Viking and then progressing all the way up now, I mean, it's interesting just to watch the progression of these different little rovers and how more sophisticated they're getting. They really do show like a trend line in progress.
Oh yeah. And speaking of life in general, this rover, its primary mission is to search for clues on whether Mars was ever habitable. It's able to look for water in the soil. And it's actually able to look down, I believe with 20 inches or so, and see what the water content is at certain rate depths. So what this is also going to do is there is a Mars orbiter, a satellite, that has looked down and has guesstimated water by weight in the soil. That says, this is 5% water by weight or 10% water by weight. And what this rover is going to do is going to be down on the ground and looking at this very specifically and saying, the surface is this. Now, what that's going to be able to do is let us calibrate what the satellite data says.
Oh.
What it's also going to be able to do is say, yeah, maybe this is the surface, but it's this a foot or two down. So does it get, is it much higher water content? Is it lower? Is it about the same? What it's also going to be doing is measuring the radiation on the surface of Mars. We've talked about all these coronal mass ejections and how Mars does not have the magnetosphere that Earth has that protects us from so much of this radiation coming from the sun or just the galaxy in general.
Right, and it's had some trouble maintaining it due to solar activity, right? Is that the same? Yeah.
So it's going to be able to measure what's on the surface. So we'll be able to tell for when we send people to Mars, this is the level of radiation they're going to have to worry about. This is what we need to protect against.
Right. That's critical, I would imagine, actually.
And the other really different thing about this rover is its landing system. A lot of people may remember the big balloons that surrounded the other landers. They bounced and rolled. And this one is not doing that. It has a little backpack, so it sheds all the protection that coming through the atmosphere of Mars does. It has a heat shield that protects it from that heat. So it sheds all that, and then it has a little backpack that comes down, a parachute slows it down, and then it fires jets. Comes down and lowers the rover on a winch. So what it's able to do also is make a very precise landing. For the other rovers, we kind of had a big circle where we said, we think it's going to be here. And then we had to stop. And once the rover was able to look up, they were looking at mountain peaks in the distance and trying to calculate, all right, in this area, the mountain peaks say this. And then they were able to take the orbiters and kind of take pictures of the areas they thought it could be in and say, yes, there it is. We see it right there.
Interesting.
But this one, it's filming. It's going to take a film of 5 frames per second as it comes down from the backpack. So they're going to be able to see the terrain as it comes down very specifically. They're able to target sort of where on Mars it's going to land more specifically.
Really, that real time, that fast?
Well, it's got internal programming.
Okay. So it'll actually be analyzing the video footage itself.
Yeah, it'll be analyzing some of the video footage and kind of aim towards specific terrain markers. And then
pretty sophisticated.
And then once it lands, it'll be able to beam back to Earth that landing video, and then the scientists will be able to say, from half of orbit distance to the ground, this is our video. So kind of track it back and in and say, this is exactly where we are. And know right away, be able to kind of use that video as saying, oh, look, this is a cool area to our east. This is a cool area about a mile that way. And sort of start getting very precise guesses about where possible interesting features are.
Where like future items on its agenda may be as it comes down, right? Because it gets that nice bird's eye view.
Yeah.
That's clever. They really take advantage of every situation they can.
Yeah, I mean this rover, it can climb over huge obstacles, so they've put a lot of effort into really looking at this. One thing that a lot of people know is that these kind of rovers have stunt doubles back on Earth.
Interesting. I've seen clips of this that made me lead to believe that must be the case.
Yeah, they have stunt doubles. So they have what they call the Mars yard, and it's dirt and rock and all sorts of different things at different elevations and hills. So what they try to do is when the rover got stuck in the sand. So they were able to say, all right, this kind of mix of dirt and sand is kind of what we think it is. Bury the rover into it, and they're able to test different ways to get out or how to go over things. So they're kind of tested on Earth in real life, not only in simulation, but sort of in real life. And then say, all right, this works. Now send those commands to Mars and see if it does the same thing.
That makes sense. It sort of reminds me a little bit of the Apollo simulators, only, now you need to simulate the ground environments for this guy. So you just you just take desert terrain and sand and probably kind of close to it, right?
Yeah, sort of like you said, it reminded me of Apollo 13 when they had the problem, and then, in the movie kind of showed that, where they just kind of summon and say, all right, everybody, dump. This is what you got. Make this work. And you go through and you test it, and you say, all right, now this is the plan. This is what we do.
Now, did you mention that this thing has an X-ray scanner too, and it'll actually be taking X-rays of some of the rocks and things like that on the planet? I mean, this thing is an entire science lab on the go.
It's going to be able to shoot out X-rays and helium nuclei, and what that'll do is it'll knock some of the electrons in the sample out of their orbit, and they will actually release X-rays. And certain elements, when they release these X-rays, they have a very specific characteristic. They're going to be able to analyze those characteristics and say, that is this element. It is 80% this, 12% this, 6% that, and the rest is miscellaneous stuff.
And this is different than the DAN thing, which helps detect like water under the ground and stuff like that. So this, which I thought was an X-ray based thing, but that's an entirely different array of instruments. So these two things alone, I mean, they're going to be able to get the chemical composition of the ground around it. They're going to be able to get a lot of interesting things with the X-ray camera, but also with this other piece of gear, they're going to also possibly be able to detect where water might be.
They're going to be
if it's like driving over water and things.
They'll be able to shoot straight down and be able to see water concentrations as low as 0.1% at 6 feet deep.
Wow.
So they're going to be able to analyze at all these different depths. And then, like I was saying, for the satellite data, use that to calibrate the satellite data and say, over the course of its driving, this is the percentages that we see in all these different areas. This is what the satellite thought it was. Sort of calibrate that, and then we're able to have a lot better
guess. Well, then it seems like once you've done that calibration, right, then if the satellite is now calibrated based on ground data from the new rover, then the satellite can be better utilized to determine where to send the rover, where it might find itself, where there's 6 feet below it, there's water.
Yeah, or over the course of the years as this goes. I mean, it'll be able to go for a while. It's going to have, it is a radioisotope, so it'll have a certain lifetime. But it can go for a while. And so they'll be able to drive over all this terrain and have all this data to say, okay, now go over here. And not only...
It's pretty impressive, too. It's something like, I think you have it in the notes, it's something like 680 days or something like that. It's a pretty significant long lifetime.
That's its mission. But that's its mission. But Spirit and Opportunity were only 3-month missions. And they've gone for years.
So do they do that? So they think, okay, we expect we're going to be able to get this 600 days of peak performance out of it, and then anything we get after that is just bonus, or how does that work?
Sort of. Now, a lot of these things, I mean, it's the government, so they'll say we must test it. It must be within all of these things. Test it 3 times as much. So if it goes to 3,000 revolutions of wheel, only expect 1,000. Or things like that. But this, it's going to start producing 125 watts at the start of the mission. And after 14 years, it'll be down to 100.
Oh, wow. After 14 years, it only loses, did you say 25 watts?
Yeah.
20 watts?
So,
Okay. You could turn off some equipment and probably recoup some of that.
Yeah. Or, you could shut things down for a little while. And the waste heat is also keeping things warm. That was one major concern that the Spirit and Opportunity had during the winter is when things get cold, they don't necessarily warm back up and work just fine.
Right. But this rover uses like the cooling, the water cooling system of the reactor to run throughout the entire body of the thing to warm it up.
To keep the instruments warm. So it's sort of utilizing every bit of waste heat it can to keep everything at the warmness level that they want it to. So you use every bit of stuff you have. If you have a whole bunch of extra heat over here, where can you use it? Pipe it over there.
I grew up in a house where we ran pipes. The people that built the house ran pipes through a wood stove, and you got that wood stove hot, and it would heat the water running through the pipes, and then it would heat the hot water tank.
Yeah.
It's kind of what this is doing. It's, you have the hot reactor, you run the water through there, and you then cycle that water down to the extremities where the sensitive science equipment is that gets cold, and you're killing two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
That's pretty clever. That's really clever. I'm looking forward to this. We have to wait till August of 2012.
Yes.
But, we'll be talking about on SciByte in August of 2012.
Yes, we will.
That's going to be fun.
Oh, yeah.
Anything else you want to cover on this one?
Look at the show notes. There's 1,000 links for photos and videos, and you can actually watch the launch live on Saturday.
It is this Saturday? It's this Saturday?
It is this Saturday.
Oh, geez, I gotta cancel Stoked. What am I doing? What am I doing?
The 26th.
Okay.
That is what their plan is now. It's only about an hour-long window on Saturday, but that's what they're aiming for at this point, at the time of the recording.
So there you go. Link to that in the show notes if you guys want to watch that. I mean, that would actually be kind of a cool one to watch live. Maybe if I'm live and you happen to swing by the chat room and be like, "Hey, don't forget." Of course, I know you're going to be busy playing a video game. You're not going to be.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. All right, well, why don't we talk about some possible news around the Io, right? Or is it
Europa.
What's the moon that's around Europa that's around Jupiter?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me about this.
Yeah, we've known for a while Europa is the ice moon, and it's the one that people have talked about because they think it has oceans underneath. And we've seen through various satellites out in the outer or solar system, it's spraying jets, and we can actually see that it is salt water. So it's got water underneath this crust. But what we've looked at now is we can see all these lines crisscrossing the moon.
It's kind of famous for these, almost like these weird patterns all over the surface, right?
Yeah, and what these patterns are is where the ice is split, the water from underneath has come up, fresh water kind of refrozen, so it creates this line. All these crazy crisscross lines. But it also has these strange areas where it's just nuts. The ice is all broken up and weird shaped. And they've been looking for a while about what could this be? And they saw this in Antarctica. They studied ice formations there to kind of get an idea of what this could be. And new research is showing that, it's got this crust of ice on the surface. It's got an ocean underneath. Now, what this may be is that a warm plume of water underneath has sort of melted a little ocean, or it has about the same amount of water as North America's Great Lakes, all of them combined. 1.5 miles down under the surface of the planet.
Wow.
So it has this chunk of water. And what this does is the ice above it weakens, it crumbles, water shoots up, refreezes, and that's what would create this crazy region of ice. So
because it's just all kinds of different pressures and different things underneath.
Yeah. And so it also is showing that there is some sort of circulation between the ocean underneath and the surface, which is important. You want circulation in a system because this kind of circulation in a system is the kind of thing that we believe you need life for. You need for life. So it's sort of another addition to the system that says, could there be life under those oceans?
It'd be pretty extreme circumstances, but there could theoretically be something that could survive.
Yeah, there are extremophiles here on Earth that require no sun. There are lakes under Antarctica's ice, like encased in the ice.
Yeah,
and we're trying to dig down to those. And
that's where all our monsters come from.
Of course,
the frozen ones.
Yeah, the frozen ones. But we've seen, not crawly, swimmy things, but we've seen, blankets of moss type stuff at the bottom, in really cold locations.
Weird little plant, some weird little plant-like things, right?
Yeah. There's all sorts of crazy plants and things that are in really cold locations that require no sunlight. And if all those kind of extremophiles can live here on Earth, it's not out of the realm of possibilities that, liquid can stay there as liquid. It's some sort of rotational mix, taking stuff from the surface and bringing it down to the ocean and vice versa. So,
and And, if you subscribe to the theory that it's possible that life could be delivered via an asteroid strike, couldn't an asteroid strike just as likely happen to Europa?
Sure. If it started on... There's some theories that, talk about transplanting life from Earth to Mars or Mars to Earth in the inner solar system, saying, can something be, if you had little green moss on Earth and it knocked it up into space, could some of it survive long enough to land on Mars? Vice versa.
Right.
Could it do it to Europa?
Could some form that could at least be the right chemicals that would maybe kick things going again?
Yeah, deposit the right kind of chemical format or anything, this sort of thing. It is a question.
It could just be epic fishing underneath there. A whole new term to ice fishing.
Sure.
No, and it also seems like, now, of course, this is really far out. This is stupid. I shouldn't even say this, but, in the fantasy world, when we're flying around the solar system, and we're gonna need resources, and it would be great if we could just drill down there and pull out some H2O.
There are theoretical missions being talked about what if we went there? What if we sent a lander there? Could we use some sort of nuclear power source to sort of melt our way down through the ice into the ocean? How would we transmit back to Earth?
Having a massive reservoir of water almost makes it a more viable spot to build a base if you could get there.
Yeah, if you could get there, if you could stay there safely. All these kind of things happen. But, it's miles of ice thick. This little lake is talking about it's 1.5 miles deep. And there's still tons of ice below it before you get to the ocean.
Oh. You need like Bruce Willis and his drill team to get out there to get into that, then is what you're saying. Time for some Armageddon saviors. That's no way that just Joe Average Drill is going to get there.
My poor science brain is sad.
I'm sorry. I know that one stings.
I know you did.
Is there anything else on the story you want to cover?
No, I think we wrapped it up with Armageddon.
All right. Well, then you know what that tone means. It's time for a quick Jupiter Broadcasting holiday announcement. That's right. You know what? We're just going to give a quick plug. No official sponsor this week for the show, but if you are maybe in the holiday shopping season right now, I would like to remind you about store.jupiterbroadcasting.com. That's where we link up all of the things like our affiliate networks and our gadgets that we love and the gear we use to do these shows. One of the things we have on the store.jupiterbroadcasting page right now is the Roku box. The Roku box starts at $50. That's crazy. You can stream thousands of things like, HBO Go, Hulu, Netflix. There's a Jupiter Broadcasting app, and you can actually watch our live shows on the Roku box. I love the Roku, and starting at $50, it's actually a pretty good Christmas present range or whatever holiday you celebrate. And, we can go up to $100 and you get HD features and things like that. So, I don't know, check out store.jupiterbroadcasting.com. We do get a great deal right now on those Rokus, though. If you have been thinking about picking one up, I'll put a link to that in the show notes, or you can get it in the store. That works as well. And then something else, maybe you want to stuff some stockings. I have a ThinkGeek affiliate link in the show notes. Use that ThinkGeek link. Anything you buy at ThinkGeek, we get a percentage of. That's awesome. A percentage of anything you get at ThinkGeek. Think about that. And I've included my personal recommendation for a solid stocking stuffer is the bacon frosting. Right? Bacon frosting. That's an epic stocking stuffer. And if you pick that up, we get a little percentage of the purchase. So thanks to everybody who does that. It's a nice little way to support Jupiter Broadcasting and SciByte and get yourself something or a relative something for the holidays. All right, it's time to move on to the news bite. What do we have up first?
Why are flies attracted to beer?
That, Heather, is a great question. Can you tell me why?
Yeah.
I just assumed because it was delicious.
Oh, of course.
You're not a beer fan,
No,
are you?
I'm not an alcohol person so much myself, but I know a lot of people out there are.
Right.
I thought this was kind of an interesting article. The insects use their taste system to glean information about the quality and the nutritional value of food sources.
So you're telling me the flies can discern that beer has a high nutritional value?
Sort of. They're able to use the odor of the beer to kind of say, hey, that's something interesting. Fly over to it. They're able to detect the glycerol, the sweet compound that yeast makes during fermentation.
Okay.
And they land and they have neurons in their mouth. It's sort of instruments in their mouth they taste it and they'll be like, yes, this is good nutritional value. Eat.
I like this. So now it would be any booze, wouldn't it? It's just your beer happens to be the one that they decided to feature. Because I would assume this would also happen with a wine or something else, right?
The yeast in particular. In the Middle Ages, water was not that clean, and a lot of people drank alcohol and beer and stuff. Not just because it was. The alcohol in it was safer than water almost, but it had some. The yeast has some nutritional value to it, and when you have nothing, you can sort of drink your food.
And it's a sanitizer, the alcohol, right?
So it sanitizes it. It did that. It had a couple of values that made it better than water. I mean, it was weaker. When you're not going to drink really, really heavy stuff, I believe it was a lot weaker than most people are going to get drunk off.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, probably.
But it was safer than strange water.
Well, the flies know. The flies have a discriminating nose, it turns out.
Discriminating nose and sensors in their mouths.
Yeah, so with those sensors in their mouths, then they taste something that's like directly wired to their brain what they're getting. It's like almost like having like sensory perception, right?
Yeah, so they will say, nutritional value, yes, continue, stay here. Or,
man, they probably
nothing,
get trashed.
fly somewhere else.
I bet those flies get so drunk, because they're just little flies.
Is that why they fly into windows so often? Is that what it is?
Maybe. So there's also a little bit of news this week, or I think it was this week, that sort of redefined how small an insect could be.
Yes.
Speaking of bugs.
I saw this article and I could not help but just talk about this. They have a little fairy wasp that is 200 micrometers in length. That's 2 strands of human hair. 10 of them could fit between the pins of a DIP.
And it's an actual bug.
It is a bug.
It
looks
flies like a bug.
It is the size of an amoeba and it flies.
So we would not be able to see this. We would not even know there could be hundreds around us, right?
Ugh, shiver up and down your back. This thing is creepy.
Where do they find these at?
What was in the news about this was that they were looking at the larva versus the adult. And they were actually able to look at the adult neurons didn't have a nucleus. It was so small that it just kind of had to kick the nucleuses out of these neurons.
Wow.
But the larva had it, so it was like it needs nucleus in its neurons to grow. But in order to live, it didn't need as much. It didn't have to have as much. So it was about what's needed for life. Sort of growing requires one thing, but just flying around and eating and doing its thing required a lot less.
That's amazing. It even has what looks like eyes. I'm sure that can't be, right?
It's got to be some sort of system to realize where it is, where it needs to go, where to get its nutritional value. So it may have sensors, it may have some sort of primitive eye, but it's got legs and wings and it flies.
I love that so far your news bite is giving me the creepy crawlies.
Yes.
So maybe we should take an eye more towards space.
Yes.
And I can stop this itching that I'm doing.
Yes.
What do we have?
Voyager, the Voyager spacecrafts. Voyager Voyager 2 is getting a tune-up. This is like increasing the mileage on your car from millions of miles away.
Wow. Yeah, it really is.
Yep.
So they can reach out to these. I mean, these things were launched, Voyager, at least in 1977, right?
So they're able to, Voyager 1 did this a few years back. What they're able to do is send commands to it and say, switch to the backup thrusters. And by doing this and saying only working on the backup thrusters, they don't have to keep the main thrusters heated. So it saves a lot of...
They actually have like a heating element in this thing that they're having to power.
Keep the fuel lines so that they don't freeze up.
Which is a design, obviously, they improved upon in the Mars Curiosity Rover.
Yeah. Well, so by doing this, it reduces the power. It lets them operate for another decade.
Whoa, really? Just by turning off that heater?
Just by turning off the one heater, they can go another decade out. Now,
with thruster power?
Yeah. Now, these things will keep going. I mean, until they smack into something or something else happens.
Yeah.
But this is the useful time.
So why are we pushing them so much?
Why?
Just to make sure they keep going? I mean,
why not?
I mean, they're not going to stop now, right?
No, they're not going to stop. But this is a decade more that they can call home.
Oh, yeah, because it also power the
data.
radios.
So they can say, this is where we are.
That's absolutely worth it.
So we can take where they are to say, this is how much they've slowed down. This is how much stuff is out there that's hitting them. I mean, it's teeny tiny stuff, but it's stuff in the universe that may hit it and slow it down just a little. So you can say, this is the density of what's out there here. This is the density of what's out there. And get this data and see this is the type of sensors that are still working. This is the kind of data we can get back. And it can phone home for another 10 years. Now,
that's so awesome.
They won't be able to call home somewhere past the mid-2020s. They'll stop being able to call home. But this means a whole bunch more time.
Power.
Yeah, they won't have the power to sort of... Sometimes what they have to do is they have to face a certain way while they're flying to protect the instruments. And then they'll rotate to beam information back home. And then, turn back so that they can fly safely and protect the instruments.
Gotcha.
So it needs the power to rotate itself. It needs the power to send a signal loud enough so that we can hear. But, I mean, these things are still going out there and they're still producing really good data. I mean, we've been reanalyzing sort of the bubble around our solar system in the galaxy. What its shape looks like. How far out, where does the solar system stop and where does the galaxy start? The data coming back from the Voyagers has redefined that information in the last few years. Oh,
I've heard a little bit about this. Now, do you know much about that? Because I'm kind of curious as to in what terms.
We thought it was a certain shape, more spherical. And then we thought, well, maybe it's more egg-shaped. And then what it turns out is it's not perfectly egg-shaped. It's kind of crooked egg.
Almost like a blimp.
Yeah, but not one that has blown up nice and perfect. It's got a little defect here.
Right. It's a little deflated.
It's a little deflated in one section, but just that information is a lot of information for us and be like, this is how we're interacting with our galaxy. This is what's going on.
That's cool. And I guess then when we kind of get an idea of how things are formed around us, kind of always, I'm sure, unlocks more interesting facts.
About how we were formed or what we should look at in other solar systems in other galaxies.
I love that we sent these out in 1977 and we're still able to send and tweak them to do different things. I mean, talk about a future-proof design.
Oh, yeah. They just keep going, and as long as they call home every once in a while, we're getting data, and it's just awesome.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? Is it time to talk a little bit about telescopes for the holidays?
Yes.
Nothing says Merry Christmas like a telescope under your Christmas tree. I've actually wanted to do this for a really long time. So and I bet, with having 2 kids, I bet eventually a telescope will work its way into our house. So I should pay attention to this segment.
Yeah. Then to start off with, there are a couple different types of telescopes. There's Newtonian reflectors. So one of them, you can view faint deep sky objects. You can do galaxies and nebula. Refractors are the lenses. So they're the long ones. You look in one end and you point what you want out the other end. They're actually good for planets and the moon. They're actually better than all the mirrored ones for the planets and the moon. And then there are Dobsonian telescopes. Those are the ones that you'll see a lot of amateurs using. They have very simple base. It's, you point it around. You don't have to line up on the North Star. And the eye lens is close to the end of the telescope. So you can kind of look and kind of hold your hand and aim it around at what you want to do.
Look and aim seems like a good thing for a beginner.
That is the other thing that I want to talk about. Honestly, for beginners, I generally recommend binoculars.
Oh, really? Now, my first reaction is that strong enough?
Yeah, you can see a lot of things. You can see star clusters. You can see a lot. You can't see everything that you can with a telescope, obviously, but you can see a lot. And especially for kids. If you're not quite sure if you're really ready to delve a couple $100 into a really nice telescope, or if you're not sure that they're ready to handle, these are scientific instruments. Are they going to take care of them? They sit somewhere in your house. Is there going to be a safe place in your house? If they get bumped or bonked or knocked over, then everything's out of alignment.
That's true. Binoculars are a lot easier to store. They're much smaller. And they don't have that tripod.
In 6 months, if they decide the stars aren't as cool as something else, you can still use them for bird watching or sports, or they can kind of be used for other things.
Oh, I like that. Okay. Now, also, I suppose, you've even on the show, you're like, now on this weekend, Saturn is going to be the best viewing position in the sky. I'm sure in those situations, binoculars would probably also work to observe. Would I be able to see like detail of the planet, do you think? Depending, I'm sure, on the binocular?
Depending on the binocular, you'll definitely be able to see around planet, and depending on the rotation and the location of the rings, you'll be able to see rings. Like I said, it won't be as awesome as a telescope, but there are some small telescopes that, I mean, you're going to get, a couple inches, 3 or 4 inch wide telescope is going to be somewhat approximate in certain situations to a nice pair of binoculars.
How do I know? Do you know, like, any tips for identifying a decent pair of binoculars?
Well, they have these funny numbers, the names, like 7x50. What that means is 7 is the magnification. It's going to be magnified 7 times.
Okay.
And 50 is describing the diameter of the main lens.
Okay.
Now,
makes sense.
Yeah, in general, what you want to, binoculars I suggest because it says, yes, you can take care of something. Yes, this interest will last. But there is something about a telescope that says, this is a telescope. That is awesome.
Yeah, and the other thing I like about the telescope, what I was thinking about it is I could set it and then be like, okay, Dylan, okay, Abby, come look. And because with binoculars, like, hold it here would be kind of difficult potentially.
Yeah, there is that too, where you can set it. And I did a lot of astronomy parties. It's where a lot of people come together and they set up their telescopes. So I can set it up, and then there's a line of people that come and they look and they say, cool. And the next person steps up and looks and says, cool. So there is that.
Yeah.
But in general, no matter what you get, there's a couple of things that you kind of have to keep in mind.
Okay.
How dark is it in your backyard? Having a really powerful telescope won't do a lot for me in a suburb of Denver. Because I can't see really dim objects. So how dark is it in the person's backyard? How far away do they have to drive to get to a dark place? How often are they going to be able to drive that distance?
Yeah. Those are all very hard but true things to think about.
Yeah, why purchase something really powerful if you're only going to be out to someplace dark enough a couple times a year?
Yeah.
It's going to waste. You're spending a lot more money. Now, if you're really passionate about it, that may be something that's worth it to you. But it's something to take in note. Also, if at all possible, get your hands on it if you want a pair of binoculars. You don't have to buy it wherever you go, but go there, pick them up. Some of these powerful binoculars are heavy.
Yeah.
You're going to have to hold them up, against your eyes.
Be ready to have to, yeah.
And I've done this before where it's like, arms tired. Nope.
Brace yourself. Prepare for that weight. Yeah.
Star went away. And it's shaky because you're having to hold.
Mm-hmm.
So who's going to be? If you're getting it for your kid, you obviously don't want a huge pair of binoculars. They're not going to be able to hold up.
Right.
They're gonna fall, and So get your hands on it, or a telescope. Even if you can't find something of the same size, maybe a little bit smaller, go to some store where you can, manage to pick it up just a little bit. Be like, this is how heavy it is. When I was a kid, my parents were, I was really passionate about this, and my parents were picking a scope, and they specifically picked one that was just within my reach of being able to lift it up. They said, you're growing, you're going to get bigger, and in a year or two, you'll be able to lift it fine. But we want something that you're going to be able to, if something happens, or if it falls on me, or, if I want to move it to a slightly different location, I have the ability to do that. I'm not limited by saying, hey, Dad, I move this 2 feet, please.
That's true. Something you can just go and do yourself is more likely to be a more successful gift.
Yeah, or if you're an adult, you don't want something so big that you're going to throw your back out.
Right.
You want to be able to, or if you have a hilly backyard, you want to be able to have a flat little place that you're going to be able to, if you're going out to places, the likelihood is you're going to have to park your car and walk a distance.
Yeah.
I've done this before. You do not want to be carrying something heavy very far. Something that you do not want to drop. There are mirrors and there are alignments, and you want to be able to carry this safely a distance.
And you're going to be compelled to do that. You're going to want to bring it somewhere so you can get the ultimate viewing.
Yeah, and you're not going to be able to leave this in your car. You can leave it in your garage or in the house somewhere. It's something that you're going to have to pick up, take to your car, load it up safely, lock it in, drive it out somewhere.
I like the idea of starting with binoculars, but and then I would think there must be, a telescope what would be great is like a telescope that worked with like an iPad, and you could, browse the solar system on your iPad, and you hit a button, you hit the area on the iPad, then it moves with a motor. Of course, that'd be really expensive.
Yeah,
it aims the telescope.
Yeah, the motor-driven telescopes are much more expensive. Now, there are, I believe even on ThinkGeek, there are things that you can put into the lens of some of these telescopes and attach it to a computer, and the computer will display what the telescope sees.
Oh, cool.
So you can aim it and then have everyone sit around the computer and say, this is what's there. Which is a lot better for like small kids, because, you hold your kid up to a telescope. I've had this happen a lot. They have the natural ability to grab and pull, which is going to move it. And if it's on a laptop, then, even if they touch the laptop or wiggle it, then it's not going to move the telescope.
That'd be really cool. Like if there was some big event happening up in space, to be able to bring that into your computer and live stream it.
Oh, yeah.
I would love to be able to live stream like an invasion.
A space invasion. I am live streaming the aliens, our new overlords.
Yeah. All right. So did I throw you off track? Were there any other points you want to make on the holiday telescope?
Yeah. The thing that obviously go with a telescope or a pair of binoculars are planispheres, star charts. There are a lot of accoutrements. There are eyepieces, there are star charts. That's why also a good pair of binoculars is good. It gets you out there. It gets you learning, where is this constellation? Where is that constellation? When I was doing this, I'd have a tarp or a blanket or something to kind of lay down on the ground, put my telescope or my chair in the middle. I mean, I did grow up around a lot of bugs, so I wanted to kind of have a safe place that I could sit, and a bag full of these charts. And one thing to know is when you're in the dark, your eyes get dark adjusted. And if a bright light shines, and then you suddenly can't see in the dark anymore.
Right.
Red light is safe. You can use a small red light flashlight. I mean, there are red LEDs now. And that will maintain your dark adaptation. Okay. So you can have a star chart, you can shine it on the star chart and say, this is where this is. And then turn it off and look up in the sky, and you can still see practically as much as you could before. So it doesn't ruin your dark adaptation as much.
That's a great tip.
So there are a lot of these, small accoutrements that you could, always get for, a person that's interested in, a bag full of these kind of goodies. Star charts and red lights and, a tape recorder or a pad and a pencil, so you can take notes about what you see. Start with the binoculars, get the lay of the land, essentially. Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of software, like Osmo 2000 says in the chat room. There's all sorts of software that you can sort of pull up. And with some of this software, it has a nighttime mode where it'll, you click it on and it'll go red. Right. For that same reason. So you could have it out there in the dark, have it on dark mode, and say, all right, this is here on the computer. Now look up in the sky. I mentioned my iPad. I don't remember what the app is called, but I can hold it up above my head to the sky, and it uses the GPS and the accelerometer and the magnetometer there, and it overlays the constellations and the names, and actually identifies the stars as I scan the iPad across the sky. I've seen some like that. Oh, it's so neat, and it's unbelievable to see it happen. Yeah, I had a coworker show it to me during the day, and he's like, well, there's that constellation there. I mean, you can't see it because it's daytime, but... And he's like pointing it down into the ground. He's like, hey, there's constellations down there and there. And yeah, I think that's so. You tie those kind of interest in with, something like that. I could go out there with an iPad and a pair of binoculars. Yeah. Get, a basic understanding of what I want to look at, and then graduate up to a telescope. Yeah, there's a lot of things you can do with binoculars or a small telescope, and you learn the lay of the land. You learn, yes, you can see a small fuzzy thing with a telescope in the constellation of Cygnus, but if you can't point out the constellation of Cygnus, you might have a hard time finding that little fuzzy thing next to the third brightest star. It is important to know how to find it. Yeah, so getting out there, learning it, there are a lot of things you can see with binoculars, but sort of getting that practice of going out, finding good locations. Another thing I really suggest is find a local club. There are astronomy clubs all over the US and all over the world. Look up in your newspaper. Go to a meeting.
Have you ever really found any good resources online too? People to get tips from and things like that? Or
there are various forums. There's astronomical leagues that have forums.
Yeah.
So you can go online and, I was a part of a club like that, so I was able to go and talk to the people and kind of, they'd have suggestions of this or that, and they'd know good locations that you could go to, dark locations.
Sure.
In where I grew up, the schools shut all the lights off at night. I mean, everything. It was pitch black. So all the cops had to do, or anybody had to do, was go by and say, hey, there's a flashlight. Go check it out.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'd do sometimes, if I didn't want to drive too far, is my mom would drive me down to the parking lot. I'd sit up in the middle of the parking lot behind the trees and just, look, and had the cops show up once and talk to my mom and be like, hey, what are you doing?
She's looking at the stars, officer, I swear.
Yeah, it's like, oh, okay, you look okay, so can continue. But, you want to find out where these kind of locations are, what parks allow you to stay after hours.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes these clubs have deals with parks where they say, hey, we're going to meet on this night. Can we stay after hours, an hour or two? Let's say,
right.
Yes, we'll have somebody there to stand at the gate and let people out as they come out.
Sure.
So they'll have these kind of ideas, or they'll have the telescopes that you could actually say, can I go out and see this or that, or, get some information or knowledge about, more than just locations and books and telescopes.
And, sometimes just going out on the back roads and stuff like that, it takes a little time to get out of town. Mm-hmm. But if you get away from the bright lights, sometimes, you can just find a nice cozy spot just driving around and just look up and be surprised what you find.
Yeah.
Another great reason to go, binoculars, I suppose, a little more easier to transport just for one of those kind of drives.
Yeah, and you could just, keep a pair of binoculars and a bag with a couple of charts and a little red LED light.
I'm glad you,
just have
you recommended that.
And then just, if you're driving out one night and you're like, I've got 20 minutes. Let's pull over in this parking lot and just kind of sit up and look and see what I can see.
Well, you have changed my mind. I am going to refocus now on binoculars. I think that's a great way to go. I really like the portability of them.
Yeah. Now, like I said, there's a certain frame of mind about a telescope. I mean, a kid sees a pair of binoculars and they're like, yay, binoculars. They see a telescope and they might be a little more excited. But
yeah, it's more symbolic, I suppose.
Yeah, there is symbology in that. But there are a lot of notes and guides in the show notes about these different types of telescopes and suggestions on what to do and what to buy.
A lot of good further reading on this one, and some guides for both sets. So either way you go, there's some good step-by-steps to go through there.
Yeah.
So always packed full of extra good links in the show notes, right?
Yes.
Now, what do you say we get down to the science calendar? You ready for this?
Sure.
All right. Well, I've got the time machine charged up. Let's jump in and jump back in time. What we'd like to do here on SciByte is look back on the amazing things that happened in science this week. And we're going to start 372 years ago, November 24th, 1639.
Yeah, we had the first transit of Venus that was measured and observed by an English astronomer.
What's a transit?
It is when Venus passes in front of the sun, so you could have a proper solar telescope and see a little black dot traversing its way across.
Gotcha.
And this kind of...
So literally transversing.
Yes, and this kind of thing can tell you about size and distance and things like that.
Okay, all right. Why don't we go 152 years ago, November 24th, 1859?
Yes, that is when Darwin published his book about the origin of species.
Wow, there you go. The origin of species, 152 years ago. And it's still controversial to this day.
Yeah, I put it in there because...
No, absolutely. I'm not. I just think it's amazing that some things in science just continue to be debated, and by at least some camps to this, to now. I mean, after all these years.
If I can jump ahead just a little to 89 years ago, there's a couple of things here at the end that are really interesting.
All right.
We've talked in the past couple of weeks about Tutankhamun's tomb. They found the step and the first couple steps. And
right.
89 years ago, they opened the first of two doorways to his tomb. And, I mean, the actual tomb itself wasn't opened until February 16th of 1923. But they sort of opened the first door and they they noticed that the seal was a little bit broken, and they saw some, broken shards and pottery inside this first little area. And they're like, oh man, another one's been looted. And then they noticed a second door, and the seal was sealed. There was no evidence that it had been messed with. And they realized, whoa, there's a whole lot more here, and we don't think anybody's messed with it.
Oh, really? Okay.
And that's when, that's one of the big deals about Tutankhamun's tomb, is that it was so well preserved and it hadn't been looted or taken, and it was in a very original form. So we could see everything that was there.
I gotcha. Well, that's pretty exciting. Mm-hmm. So that was 89 years ago.
Yes.
And that was that wasn't a specific day. That took place over the 25th and the 27th, right?
Yeah.
Of 1922.
Yeah, over the course of a few days is when they, opened the first door, they looked around, analyzed the second seal of the door. These kind of things with archaeology, they take it very slow and methodical. So it took a couple of days, but it was this week.
Should we go ahead to 50 years ago, November 29th, 1961, one of the first brave servicemen of our world enters space?
Yeah, Enos, the little 5-year-old chimpanzee. He became the first chimp to orbit the Earth.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Made a two-orbit ride, took about 3 hours, a little over 3 hours.
That wasn't us though, right? That was Russia, right?
No, that was us. That was U.S.
Oh, okay. It was Russia sent the dog.
Russia sent the dog. This was the first chimp to orbit. There's a lot of animals that went into space that kind of went up and down and orbited.
This was the first monkey.
Yeah, this was the first, monkey, and he had been trained. He was supposed to pull levers, and it was this lever was the right one to pull, and if he pulled the wrong one, it would give him a little shock.
Poor dude.
They actually had to call the mission short a little bit. There were some thruster issues, and there was also an issue with that system in that even when he pulled the right lever, it was shocking him. The poor little dude kept going, though. He kept pulling the right lever. He was determined. He's like, dude, what is going on? This is the right button. And so they realized, all right, cut it short. Bring him down.
This job sucks.
He's like, man, this really stinks. I'm doing all the right things, but I'm still getting that. Not making any progress.
That's a good life lesson right there, even for the monkeys. You can go up into space, and we might have the technological capability to get a monkey into space, but we cannot get the lever thing figured out right, so that he still ends up getting shocked, the poor dude.
Yeah.
All right, well, this last one here actually happened fairly recently ago, 10 years ago, November 27th, 2001. Yes.
Sodium was detected in the atmosphere of an extrasolar planet.
Salt.
Yes. This planet was the first one that was detected by the transit when, we've talked about, you can see star wobble, and you can also see when planets pass in front of it, it dims the star.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is the first one that we saw via that way. And then 10 years ago,
where you analyze the light and whatnot that passes through it?
Yeah, this specific planet is it is like 1,000 degrees, so it's boiling off its atmosphere. But so it's leaving as it passes in front of the star, it's sort of leaving a trail, almost like a comet.
Cool.
So you're able to see on the planet and then the trail behind it. Later,
that is neat.
Later, they were able to identify oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, all these different things in its atmosphere.
That planet would make an awesome planet on an episode of Star Trek.
Yeah. So
I just picture this massive trail of just cloud of junk following it, right?
Yeah. And it's just that we're able to identify all these different elements in the atmosphere of a planet orbiting another sun.
That is kind of epic.
Its technical name HD 209458b, but it does have a cooler name, Osiris.
Oh, I like Osiris. Now they just took the HD from the other part and they could do Osiris HD, and that is a badass name. Right? All right, what do you say we look up into the sky?
Yes. This past week, Arctic countries like Norway and think very high up, they saw their last sunrise and sunset until January.
Jeez.
They're way far up.
I was on the live stream pre-show. I was complaining about it getting dark and getting sleepy at night because I was and now I got nothing on these guys.
Yeah. No, these far north and far south areas, sunsets, and it sets for a couple months.
Poor Norway.
Or the day, these last couple days were like 15 minutes long. It rises, it never reaches fully above the horizon. It just sort of goes half above the horizon and then sets.
I'd love to see a report on the economic impact of that.
Oh, there are psychological impacts of lack of sunlight for that long.
Yeah. Yeah, I would imagine. And that's why I was thinking, their economy must slow down. I mean, people just must not work as much.
Yeah, it's like, oh, dark. It's nice for astronomy, but, bad for, normal daytime function.
Yeah, the telescope nuts are just ecstatic.
Yeah, they're like, woohoo! I'll see you in 3 months, Bob.
I didn't think of that. So last week I'd asked you, is the sun just been crazy active lately?
Sunspot activity is remaining high, but the solar activity, like flares and coronal mass ejections, that actually has been low fairly recently. There have been a couple of big ones that we've seen, but overall been fairly low, especially for the amount of sunspots on the sun.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of sunspots don't necessarily mean
solar flares or coronal mass ejections or these kind of things.
Coronal mass ejection, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, they generally...
I didn't want to call it something else.
Yeah, they generally start in sunspot areas, but those sunspots sort of have to evolve to a certain level, and we're kind of figuring out what has to happen to make all the things fall in line for those to happen. But there have been a lot of sunspots, so there's been a lot of potential, but not a lot has come out of it.
Okay. Now, this next little bit of looking up into the sky takes place tomorrow, the day that this episode is being released, Wednesday, the 23rd.
Yep. The moon will be at perigee, means its closest point to Earth for its current orbit. Which means it's going to be about 15,000 miles closer than it is on average.
Ooh.
Which, it's going to be about 224,000 miles away. So it's still far, but it's interesting to note that at its closest approach is like 15,000 miles closer.
Yeah.
So the moon may look a little bit bigger, and it may actually be a little bit bigger because it's a little bit closer.
My son Dylan is all about the moon these days. He finds it very interesting, so maybe I'll have to try to sneak out there and let him get a peek of it.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on Friday?
Friday, Antarctic. Those places may be having a little bit of trouble with the sun, but a little bit farther south, there's going to be an Antarctic solar eclipse.
Ooh.
So the moon's going to pass in front of the sun. It's not going to be a total one. It's going to be a partial one. But for places like parts of Antarctica, Tasmania, parts of South Africa, New Zealand, I think the most part is going to be about 100 miles off the Antarctic coast. But it'll cover all but like 9% of the sun. But they'll be able to see a partial solar eclipse.
That's always kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have something for Saturday too, don't we?
Yep. At twilight, low in the southwest sky, you'll be able to see a thin crescent moon. And to the upper left, it will be a bright object, and that will be Venus.
Oh, okay. It's always my mom's favorite. I'll have to let her know. She always likes to see that one.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so that's Saturday, November 26th, and of course, all of those are in the show notes, as well as links to other stuff that's coming up in the sky this week. And now I think that wraps up all of the content we have for this week. We have a little bit of business to talk about because next week is our first video edition of SciByte.
That's right.
I'm excited about this because SciByte, before we relaunched it, was always a video show.
Yeah.
Now the new format is 3 weeks. 3 weeks out of a month are audio only. The fourth week is in video, audio released together.
Yeah, and that's going to be, there may be some new stuff, new science news, but there's also going to be some recaps of things that have happened in the last couple weeks that have really great visuals or updates on some of these stories.
Yeah. Oh, you know what I had when we were all done? I had like a victory jingle for us. Yeah, he's got like the little beep at the end. That was my favorite part. That's actually what sold me on the whole thing. The doom. So you can watch that. I guess we'll do it at the same time, 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you want to tune into jblive.tv at 7:30 p.m. Pacific, we've also got jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar where you can just get that in your own time zone. If you're not in Pacific, I understand how that works for most of you. And then, of course, we'll release the download. You can get that over at the main site, where you can always get this, as well as the RSS feeds. So do that. Anything else you want to cover before we head out of here, Heather?
Not that I can think of this week.
Well, shoot. Thanks for joining me again for another week of science. It was a good one.
Yes, it was.
And thanks to everyone out there for joining us. And we'd love to see you in the future. Join us live in this chat room and share the science with us. And tune back in next Wednesday for an all-new download of SciByte. Thanks, everybody, for listening. See you next week.